John,
Angie,
do you think I'm rude?
look who you're asking. Are you sure you want me to answer this question, Angie?
Oh, come on, seriously.
My mum always says, don't ask questions you don't want to hear the answer to.
Oh,
Look,
you're terrible.
I wouldn't exactly call you rude, but why do you ask?
Because I noticed lately that I am interrupting clients that are what I feel like they're talking too much and it just feels rude.
Yeah, I get you. I've been there. Look, I think that's a great topic for our episode today, so let's get into it.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
Yeah, like this is a real thing.
Oh, it is. And sometimes it can be a real bane of being a coach. It's like, I know this. I've had co-hosts who talk too much. I have to deal with that as well, Angie.
Yeah, and it's similar. And I think the thing about it is that it goes against what we're taught, right? Don't interrupt, right? We're taught not to be rude. We're taught that you don't interrupt people when they're speaking. But I am very consciously aware that I have been interrupting more. I feel like lately, I don't know why that would be, but now I'm seeing it. I'm seeing that I am interrupting when I feel like, I don't know. I think it's when I feel like it's becoming irrelevant and it's just becoming a story, he said, she said, or something like that. And I'm like, no, we're going way off path here. Way out. Yeah. We're rolling into the weeds and now we're lighting ourselves on fire.
I am all for 100% giving clients the space to be able to express themselves and to say what's really on their mind. But I also am very aware that sometimes they get into loops, ruts, stuck on something. I sometimes work with people who are trying to figure out what they want to say while they say it, and it can end up taking a really long time, or it just becomes very one-sided that they just want to monologue to you, give you, just unburden themselves.
It's like their venting space. It's like and listen, I'm going to say that there is value if a client comes to a session and they're really feeling it, right? They're all up in their own emotions and in their head. Sometimes you need to give them a little bit of space just to vomit out all of the toxic. But even then, when you even hear there was an ending to the story that they're not aware of, to say, okay. So I think there's a couple of, as I was thinking about doing this and talking about this, obviously there's a few things that I think about, but I want to hear your perspective. So I think when we are interrupting, number one is, when is it appropriate? I think we touched on that earlier. When is it appropriate? But I also think how we do it is super important. So when you're interrupting, even if it's somebody who's on your podcast, how do you do it?
There's a few different ways and that I like to use. And I will say this is something I got better at the more I did podcast interviewing. That actually helped me a lot in client sessions. So sometimes I'll say, if they're going on a bit, I will say, oh, that's very interesting what you just said there. Sorry for or I might say, oh, sorry to interrupt, but what you just said there was really interesting. Can we talk a little bit more about that? And so you're still directing and driving the conversation in that sense. And there are times where I have had to sometimes interrupt because I don't do a live show with my podcast, and my coaching calls are private, one-to-one, unless I'm in group. But there have been times where I had to say, all right, we have to, it would be good to keep this a little bit briefer so that we can stay on track with this. So tell me what's really going on here. Because they know then that you're still pushing them. You're not just saying, all right, could you just shut up for a moment, please? You're saying,
right. And listen, I'm going to say this for the record. It's never a good idea to tell somebody to be quiet or shut up. Never a good idea.
No, I don't think it's in a client situation, particularly, it's very disrespectful. If you're interviewing somebody, it's also disrespectful unless it's a joke and banter that you both get that and you're both laughing about it. That's fine. But anything outside of that probably is not. So I don't recommend it. It's very confrontational to shut
Listen,
up or be
okay,
quiet.
so you just hit the nail on the head. We as coaches, let's recognize here that we as coaches, we can feel things too. There are clients in general that it's not situational, right? There's clients that will come to coaching and maybe they think it's therapy. They don't really know that how this is supposed to look, and it's our job to redirect them. But then there are those people, like it or not, who just love to complain, who just love to talk, and maybe it's because they're not getting that place else in their lives, like
Yeah. Oh,
whatever it
yeah, for sure.
is, right? But we still have an obligation to them to steer and direct or redirect. So we have to watch our own energy. And as you
Yeah.
guys might know by now, after all these episodes, we've been doing this for a year now. I think that John has really a different kind of energy than I do. So I have an energy that I'm very aware of. I have tonality that I'm very aware of. So when I am interrupting, I recognize that I have to be very intentional. Before I interrupt, I have to make sure that I'm not using my, we're laughing because I'm very direct in general. So I really do have to be like, wait a minute, I have to check my energy so that I don't come off as disrespectful, combative, or anything like that. Because the last thing I'm going to do with a client is debate.
Yeah. Did you ever get into that stuff of many like coaching programs or anything like that where you talk about these different communication styles of direct communication and indirect communication?
Yeah.
And I definitely probably fell more into when I first came across like, oh yeah, I'm more of the indirect communicator, but not always. I think whichever side you fall into, whether you do tend to be more direct or whether you do tend to maybe dance around things and try and
Yeah.
get people to get into the groove rather than just saying something directly. There are times where you have to be direct if you're not naturally direct, and there are times where maybe you do want to be a bit more indirect when you're a direct communicator. Like we can learn from that. I do try to be a little more direct with people because it's really helpful. And in coaching situations, it can be really beneficial. We can cut to things a lot quicker if we're not dancing around an issue. If we actually just say, "Hey, look, can I be direct and honest with you here? I'm going to ask for permission before I do this, but can I
Yes.
be direct with you here and tell you what's coming up for me in my mind right now? And this might be wrong, but this is just what I'm getting." And then you can sound it out.
You need to let them know that it's an observation and that, like, I love what you said. There's a few things, right? Number one is, especially if you don't know your client so well yet, you want to ask for permission. May I ask a question? And they could be in the middle of talking. You say, you know what? Can we just take a pause for 1 second? May I ask you a question? And so they feel respected. They still feel valued because that's important. We don't want to come in like a bull in a china shop going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now, wait a second. I have some clients that I've had for 8 years, right, at this point, and I know them well, right? And they know me well to a degree. And I will sometimes do a healthy call out and say, wait, let me pause. Really? Is that the truth? Like my tone changes. I'm a little bit more direct and I'm not pussyfooting around. I'm really going directly into it because I know that they know that I know and they know, like it's a whole thing. But I really think that while you're establishing respect and authority, it's very important actually to disallow them because you know what? I've trained coaches when I'm listening to their sessions and I've heard people give feedback at the end of a session. That's part of what we did with this other space where a client is actually aware. It may not be in the moment, but after the end of the session, they're going to be aware, like, you really didn't coach me. You just let me ramble. They want to be. They want to be redirect. They are relying on us and our expertise to help guide them through and maybe get them out of the weeds and extinguish that fire a bit. So there's a whole slew of things where, we've talked about therapy. Sometimes you can hear the sound, like the sirens going off, like this needs to be a therapeutic space for this person too.
Yeah. There are times, and I think this is more a case of like, you have to judge it on the situation and what you're understanding from it. But if you're really seeing that this is just happening all the time with a client, or this you think is going that way, then I don't think it is a bad thing to call that out and say, hey, look, can we just, as you say, can we stop, take a moment? Here's what seems to be happening now, and I'm not sure it's productive to getting the results that we probably want to get from our coaching sessions, but tell me what you think. Here's what I think is going on. It's like the conversation isn't really a conversation right now, and we're doing a lot of talking, but we're not getting to anything substantive. So if it's okay with you, I want to try it this way, that we're going to direct the conversation a bit more, and if I feel we're getting off track, I might interrupt you and just say, hey, look, can we get things back on track here? And I want you to be able to come away from your coaching session feeling that we've done something valuable, not that I've just let you talk for 30 minutes.
I try not to use the word ramble on and on. I don't want to say that.
And clients, the trick, it can be tricky as well, because I've had this where clients have said, oh yeah, don't let me ramble on and on. And they've said that. I don't want to say that you're rambling. I just want to say it's okay, but I think there's a better way we could be doing this.
This is very true. One of the things I do is when somebody actually signs up with me and signs on with me, our first session, they get a little bit of extra time because I spend about 5 to 10 minutes in that first session going over some housekeeping, like things that they need to know about how I run the business. Hey, if I call you and you don't show up, like those kinds of things. And one of the things that I say is, and I have to be really honest, I don't want to scare you. There are going to be times within our coaching sessions where I will interrupt you. So I'm telling you now, I don't want you to receive it as me being rude. It's that I see a need in that moment to redirect. So understand where it's coming from. I just set the precedent because I do all the time.
I do a similar thing. I like to frame up how the coaching is going to work in that in that first session, and I say similar things to you, and I will do that permission thing in that session. But I will do it again later, simply because I don't just think, oh, one permission is enough. I want to remind them that I asked them for permission before I do it. It's okay.
Absolutely.
Let me just check. Here's what I'd like to do. I think it's great respect for them. But in my experience, the people who really do want to just talk and talk, they will not let you interrupt them. That's what I found.
That's a good point. So what do you do with the ones that are like pummeling through you at your advances, right? And you're trying to get them to go in a different direction. So how do you handle that?
When they're not picking, if that's only ever going to happen for one session, tops, one session. And so if I'm trying to interrupt and they're just ignoring it, or they're just plowing through it, as you say, if we get to the end of a session, and I haven't really had this with clients as much as I've had it with podcast guests, but I could see it happening in a session as well. But if we get to the end of a session and it feels like I've just been to their TED talk, we want to have a conversation with that. This is the end of our session. We can't actually need to have a chat and evaluate that, because do you feel that was an effective session? Is this how you want things to go on in the future? Because this isn't how I coach, where you just talk for half an hour or an hour and I just listen to it. That is not coaching. So let's have a think about how things could either be different on our next session, or maybe we need to reevaluate if this was the right decision. It has to be that for me.
Absolutely. We have to, listen, I've said this to you, we've talked about it. We have to be the pace car of the session. There's a reason why we're in the position that we're in. But at the same time, I think, too, sometimes we have to listen to the energy. So if somebody's just rambling and then the dog ate and it's, just minutia, or there's this energy and you could hear the angst or the anger or the eruption of emotions, that's a little bit different. And in those moments when it's really super energy, I will say, Okay, wait, John, I hear you. I think we need to take a pause. I just want you to take a couple of deep breaths for me because I hear it and there's nothing that's going to stop it unless I just stop it right in that moment. Again, if somebody's just rambling and I'm like, so wait, let me ask you. So how relevant is what you just said to me to the overall? Because I want them to see, I don't want to point out what I think is wrong with it. I want them to see it for themselves to try and get them
Yeah.
out of that habit. Because some people it is just habitual, but some people it is situational. And in the situational spaces, what I try to do is just stop that energy, let them take a few cleansing breaths and say, okay, now let's get straight to this. This is what I heard, right? So that's it takes a couple of minutes, I think, to even do that. We have to honor where they're at because whatever it is, they're feeling it, whether it's the situational space or they just, I used to call it like the Charlie Brown teacher. You can't relate. Yeah, because that's not what we want our sessions to sound like, obviously. That was good, John. Can we do that
It
again?
was. Wah, wah, wah.
Okay, we're done. Anyhow,
still have
so
Yeah.
now
I
we don't know
think
what to say.
No, I think there's a situation where this becomes even more important, which is in group settings. And
Sure.
it's harder to rein people in group settings than it is individual ones. And there's a few different ways it tends to go, in my experience anyway. One is the person who wants to be like the teacher's pet, I guess, and they want to ask all the questions and they want to really be your favorite. Another is like the star performer who just wants the stage the whole time and doesn't really want to give
Yeah.
anyone else a look
Yeah.
in. And
They
then
want to
there
be
is
the teacher.
right. And then there's the ramblers and the people who just are not very good at being succinct and maybe just not used to communicating or operating in these sorts of coaching environments where it really does help if they can be more succinct. And in all of those situations, it is going to be up to you to direct and guide them into the correct path because you are more precarious in a situation, in my opinion, where if you are the coach on the call and you're letting one person dominate the call,
Oh, absolutely.
everyone else on that call is going to blame you for it because you are supposed to be the person in control of the
Absolutely.
call.
Yeah.
And so you have to reestablish control, but not in a way that needs to upset anyone. You can either reestablish control of, all right, I love your questions and I love that you're really enthusiastic. I do want to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask questions as well. So we'll open the floor up, and if no one else comes up, then we will come back to you. But
You
let's see
and I
what
think
other questions we have.
experienced a couple of the same people in that space. And listen,
That's-
group coaching is very challenging. Everybody thinks it's easy and it's not because you're not just managing the topic, let's just say, of the session. Like you're managing as many people that come onto that, and you never know what you're going to get. And it is a little bit harder. And if you can, I can always tell when say, oh, so John, I see you have your hand raised. Okay, so what's up? Back in 1933, what? No, this is not going to go well, right? What's coming? But also, again, setting the expectation at the beginning. And I try to do that in a group setting. I always try to say, hey, listen, let's just be respectful of each other's time. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to participate. So before you ask your question or tell your story, just keep time in the top of mind because we only have 60 or 90 minutes or whatever it is. And I want to make sure that everybody has that opportunity to participate openly. And it's a good way to, some people really honor it, but I've had people in the background that are like typing into a chat privately, can you please, this person, and I had it happen. I did a webinar. I actually did a webinar in December. I had a couple that I did. And in one of them, I specifically asked a participant a question, and I don't even know what the answer was to this moment, to be honest. And it was just a very long, and I was like, I felt it coming, and I was like, okay, wait a second. Let me ask you. Let me go back to the question. How did you feel about XYZ? And, oh, yeah, that's right. Because I think John and I have had conversations like that. Depending on what room I'm in when I'm talking to him, I could be talking about pillows 1 second and rugs the next, and then heat like it depends on what room I'm in.
Yeah,
But
but
point,
neither of us are billing each other for our time there.
thank goodness, and that's the truth. So yeah, so the bottom line is that always setting the expectation is a good idea, whether it's group or one-to-one. But
Yeah,
it's hard in that group setting because you're
I will. Yeah, I agree with you, and I will say this as well, because I've come across it. That even when you do that, and it is completely reasonable to do that, there will be people who don't think it is, or think that
yeah.
you're putting pressure on them, or might complain about it to you or to someone else if you're not working
Mhm.
alone. And you definitely want to just reframe them if you can, but don't let them tell you that is not a reasonable request for them, or that you feel you have to pull back, because it's going to reduce your ability to control your own groups. And you do need to
Yeah.
maintain control as the coach, as the group coaching leader or presenter, or whatever situation it is you're in. You risk
Yeah.
losing control of the room. And another thing is, if you don't, and one of your other students or clients ends up doing it for you, that kind of disempowers you a bit as well. So better for you to do it.
Listen, but have you ever had, and I've had this happen, I've had it happen probably 2 or 3 times where even before it gets to be exhausting, I've had people chime in a group environment and go, you know what, John? I think at the beginning of this, Angie did say, let's be a little respectful of time. And you're just gobbling it all up. And I'm like, oh no. All right, everybody, settle down. Kindergarten is not in session. I've had that
Sure.
happen though. So have you had it happen?
Yeah. And I'm a natural diplomat, so I'm very good at smoothing things over. I think you know this about me. And so I always tend to find that way to smooth things over. I say, okay, I understand you're feeling maybe a little frustrated here, but let's also be respectful and nice to each other on this call as well. I'm sure you didn't mean anything personal by that, but I don't want this to descend into into anything that it's not. Let's stay impeccable with our word, or however you want to phrase it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. We can
Yeah.
always get
No,
agreement. We can always find agreement.
it can happen. You'd be shocked. You think that when you're in a room full of adults, so to speak, that room could be the one-on-one space or whatever. You think that people are just
Dynamics.
naturally going to behave a certain way. And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes those rooms are just like when you're driving on the road. You think that you're driving like a 2-ton vehicle and somebody's going to stay out of your way, but they cut you off. Anyway, I'm being a
Group
little
dynamics
silly.
can be weird, and you don't know how people are going to be in different groups with different people,
Yeah.
because some people might bring out a little impishness in other people, or they get into being silly and playful and disruptive. Some people may not really connect with each other and might
Yeah.
disengage a bit from what you're doing.
Yeah.
All sorts of things that can go on. This is more relevant in live group
Sure.
workshop event situations, but still worth noting, because I've had it in webinar and group coaching sessions where people have very clearly been either private messaging each other in the chat,
Yeah.
or very clearly doing other things whilst we're in the session and not really present in the session.
Yeah.
I don't want to beat down on them for doing that. I want to
Yeah.
encourage them to, "Oh, look, I know it's okay. I get you want to chat with each other, and that's great. I love that you want to speak to each other, but I also don't want that to become a distraction from what we're doing here on the call. So if it's urgent, then great, carry on. But if it's not, let's bring our attention back to this for now, and
Yeah.
do what we're here for. Or if you're
Sure.
doing something else, I encourage you. You're busy, you have things to do, whatever else. You're trying to do a lot at the same time. But let's try and bring focus and presence back to what we're doing now. Otherwise, like anything that we don't do with our full focus and presence, we don't fully do it. Multitasking is not a real thing. It's just it's distraction.
Oh, absolutely. It's not even something you can do. We can talk about that sometime. I've seen coaches do it actually, which is, I'm like this with the shame on you. Don't do that. It's almost along the
Oh,
lines of the scrambling of the eggs that I've talked about. But
yeah.
anyway, to come back to where we're at, I think that it's really important to, as a coach, have the confidence to be able to navigate and manage your sessions, right? And feel free to interrupt, but we don't want you to do it. I've had experiences, again, while training other coaches, where it's too much. They cut in a little too often because they're not even letting a client get a full thought process out. And
Yeah.
it may take, listen, and this is true. Let's think about this. I'm a very fast talker. Not everybody is. So it does take some people longer to express themselves. So you have to, so it's not so much the tick-tock of the clock and how long it's taking. It's what's the focus of what's being said. So if it takes longer for them to articulate, or sometimes they're really thinking through, they're just thinking out loud, sometimes you need to allow for that, because that's where their self-discovery is actually happening at times. So if it takes somebody, I don't know, 7 minutes to articulate a thought or a feeling or something, I think sometimes we need to know as coaches that they are onto something, and to shut up. Just be quiet. Let it happen. Don't try to pull it out faster. Let it happen organically. And again, there's a balance there.
I don't want anyone to think that we're saying, oh, we have to make this speedy.
Yeah.
We do have to, you said it earlier, we have to meet our clients where they're at. I have worked with clients in the past who have had like speech difficulties, and one client had some brain damage after a car accident that meant he took a while to say things, and it wasn't always easy. You had to really listen to get what he was saying. I'm all for that. I'm happy to do it, because if we can still make it work, I'm going to give you all the patience I've got to get to what we need to get to. I'm not going to be rushing you along. I'm not going to be interrupting you. And I want to give you the space to be able to speak. But for most people, that's not the case. So I think that there are even ways we can frame things of, would it be okay, for example, I would say, would it be okay if I help to move you towards being a little more succinct with what we're talking about here? Would that be valuable? You could ask.
Yeah. I think my point was just simply that not everybody thinks things out loud to the speed of somebody like me. I think that just some people are much calmer in energy and demeanor, and they just speak like I am now, right? I'm slowing down, and I'm not as energetic about it. And that was a hard lesson for me, because there were times where I was sitting there going, when is this coming to something? But they weren't rambling. They weren't all over the place. They were still in a line, like they made sense, and it was a journey that they were verbally taking me on. And I was like, okay, I have to take a couple of breaths myself, because again, like you said, not everybody is like that, but it absolutely happens where not everybody's going to match our energy. Or somebody like you're calmer. Somebody comes up and they're like, you might be like, okay, Angie, I'm missing a bit of this. Let's go back to the first point.
But the reality is, I'm a fast thinker and a fast talker as well. And I like you, I have to control that. When I was very first being trained up for delivering certain online trainings with another organization, they were very keen that I had to turn the energy up. But in doing that, I kept finding myself going faster. And they're like, you have to be able to turn the energy up and slow yourself down. And it is honestly so difficult to do that, because when you're getting more energized, the natural tendency is to want to go faster. But when we're doing something like this, for example, having a podcast conversation, if we were just speaking at normal conversational speed, going 10 to the dozen, it would be hard for some people to keep up with that. And I tend to listen to podcasts on double speed. I would not be able to listen to Miss Angie on double speed. I can tell you that.
I don't know what you mean by that.
You know exactly what I mean by that. But that's just the reality of it. We do sometimes need to slow ourselves down, but we don't want to, as you said, become Charlie Brown's teacher. We don't want to lose tonality or lose excitement. Not whack my microphone, but we want to lose anything from doing that. We just want to make sure we can be understood by everybody.
Yeah.
Some people won't do it. I know A friend of mine, Taki, he'll say like, "I speak fast, so you're gonna have to think fast." And makes no
Yeah,
apologies for it, and
sure.
that's just how he is. And if you can't deal with it, you're not gonna do well in his groups.
Well, I think too, the listening piece, when you do have somebody who's got a lot of energy, so they're not like when we think of rambling, I think we think it's nothing relevant. Sometimes people come into sessions where they've got a lot of really important insights and things to say, and they all run into each other. They start just blurting some things out. You as a coach need to be able to keep track of those things, even if you just take a little note on what their focus is. You need to be able to go back and say, okay, wait, John. So let's just review for a minute. First, you talked about this is relevant to you. Yes, it is. And this, so of those three things that you just shared, which do you think is, most relevant to you at this time? Just making that up. I'm throwing that. This way, they're aware, A, that you are listening. That's really important. B, now they're aware of what they're saying and they can actually take a second and say, okay, what really is most important? You're not going to forget those other things, but we can't attack all the things at one time. So, I think as a coach, it's really important to be able to do the dissection, even when somebody's like machine gun sharing. And that's what I call it. It's like that's coming at you. And we can get a little lost in that sometimes too. So we have to, I make little notes and I go, okay, wait, let me just make sure I'm understanding. This is this and this is this. They're all relevant, which is the most, just so I can redirect them, reframe their whole thought process and bring it back to what are we going to do today? Yeah.
There's a well-known speaker, I'm not going to name, but some people are going to know who I'm talking about, who
Ooh, I
talks in
wonder if I will.
he might, but he talks in it's a he, and he talks incredibly fast when he's delivering his talks. And I'm fairly certain that one of the reasons for that is so that people don't really have that much time to think about what's being said or perhaps challenge stuff in their head.
Really?
It goes too fast. Like I remember one time I did see this guy speak somewhere, and thank goodness it was recorded. But then when I went back through the replays, I saying a lot of stuff here that I don't really support or agree with or can't quite get behind. But it's interesting. But at the time, it was just this, as you said, this barrage of information coming at me. I don't think it's a great way. I don't know how this guy is successful as a public speaker, but he is. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to my audiences, because what was the real takeaway other than that was a lot of information?
Mhm.
I didn't remember any of it. And all I was thinking of was I need to listen to the replay to get any of that. I don't think that's a good place to leave your audience.
I think it's important what you just said. Also, when we're communicating within our sessions, we have to be careful not to go overboard in terms of what we're saying. I do believe that in coaching, you should be doing less of the talking. That's just my belief.
I
And
agree,
I
generally.
have all the experience that supports that. But sometimes if we are, I don't know, explaining something or getting into, we can be a little bit confusing. That's why I'm saying, like, in the moment when somebody brings something up, don't wait too long into the session to address it because you're past that. I'm sorry. That was like 30 minutes ago. I'm in a different space right now. So you have to keep yourself straight as well so that you don't become confusing to the client. I've heard people do it and I'm like on the call going, oh my gosh, did that happen? And I can't stop it because it's a recording that I'm listening to. So yeah, I think that's important as well. Like we have to watch, of course, manage the call, be the pace car with the client, but also with ourselves. Also
Yeah.
with ourselves, because there's a lot of coaches, I'm going to do it right now, that love to talk.
hmm
Don't be a talker.
Yeah. No, if there's ever a session with a client where I think I'm going to have to talk a bit more than usual here, I will frame that and say to
Yeah.
them, this is going to be a bit of a different session. You probably will
Yeah.
hear more from me than you usually do. But
Yeah.
that's not how these things generally go. I want them to know that. But I'm very aware of that because I have had coaches who are like that, and it's not good. It's not recommendable. But I was going to say before, actually, I've also had situations with certain clients where I have ended up giving a little bit of coaching to them on how they communicate and being able to be more effective in their communication.
Uh-huh.
Because if they are dancing around things too much or taking way too long to get to a point, people are going to be tuning them out probably pretty quick, especially if they're used to them doing that, if that's how they always communicate.
Yeah.
And so helping people be able to get to the point quicker and to take away some of the dressing, because unless you're a professional raconteur, probably people don't want to hear it. They'd much
Right.
rather that you got more to the point. Maybe you can dress things up a little bit, but rein it back yourself and just know yourself with this. Could you be a little more concise? Doesn't have to be super concise. You don't have to be blunt or super curt about everything, but
Sure.
just could you get to the point a little quicker with things? How much framing do you need to give to be
Yeah.
able to tell something? You don't need to give necessarily a whole recount or a historical recap of what led to the thing that you actually want to share,
Right.
which some people do. So it can be really helpful to give people the coaching on that, because that can actually be transformative for them and their relationships and how they communicate in their own lives.
Interesting that you brought that up because, and I try to, I don't say I try, I definitely am very aware of it. If a client comes in and they want to talk about an exchange they had, whether it's with a partner or a boss or an employee or a kid, whatever it is. And I don't really usually allow for the he said, she said, but if if I can identify that it's relevant to something that we're working on, I will allow it. And in those times, I will, when I try to reframe, what I will do is I will say, John, let me ask you that you said that, I'll repeat back whatever the statement was that they said. And I'll say, is that how you delivered it? Is that how you said it? Or are you just venting to me? And that is how I will help them become aware of how are you really communicating with people? Because if you're doing it with me, sometimes when we vent, we have a little bit more energy into something. But I've found many times that it's not as like, well, no, I'm actually being calm right now as I'm explaining this to you. I'm like, okay, how effective do you think that? So that gets me into a whole different conversation without saying, hey, we're going to get into a whole conversation, right? I'll
Yeah.
try to focus it on something else, like you said, communication or how you're communicating, rather than the machine gun situation again.
Look, rants can be great for comedy, but probably not so great for general communication.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think this is all really good stuff. I think it's important to recognize that we as coaches, part of, I think, the responsibility we have to our clients is to respectfully be able to stop the negative or the whatever that negative is that's coming into the session and be able to interrupt them. I think it's important. It's a skill to be able to do that. I don't think that is something that we're all born with. I think it's something that we need to learn and maybe master to some degree so that we're not offensive and we aren't being rude.
Very much so. We don't want to be rude. Angie, what did the interrupting sheep say?
The interrupting sheep?
Yeah, you have to say, I don't know. What did the
I don't know. What did the interrupting sheep say? That's Guy. Oh my gosh.
Don't know why I thought of that. Look, I think we've covered a lot of good stuff
We
today.
did.
We've had some fun. It's a great topic, and hopefully it's going to help you to rein in the people who are maybe talking a bit much and be able to respectfully bring things in line, especially if you're doing group coaching and you come up with any of the things you talked about.
Yeah.
Look, maybe there are some situations that we didn't cover that relate to this that you thought of. We'd love to hear that. And any questions you have about this topic or any other things to do with the coaching clinic, that questions that you might want to put to myself and Angie, there are some ways that you can get in touch with us, and we would love to hear from you. Now, on LinkedIn, you're very welcome to connect with us and send us messages there. The links to our profiles are in the show notes for the episode. So you can send us voice message, you can send us video messages. We would love to hear from you, and we will feature you and your questions or your input onto the show as well. And if you want to leave us a voicemail, you can do that for free. You can go online to speakpipe.com/the Coaching Clinic podcast. You can leave us a voicemail there. It's free to do. However we hear from you is all good, but we would love to hear from you. So please do get in touch with the show, and we're going to be back pretty soon. We've got a few topics coming up, like we're going to talk about fixed and growth mindset. We're going to talk about psychological safety, a load more other stuff. So don't miss any of that. And we'll look forward to coming back with some more wonderful episodes from the Coaching Clinic. See you
As
soon.
always.